My ex invited me to his wedding to show off, but my plus one walked in and he instantly knew who it was. Hello everyone. I never expected to share this, but after everything that happened, I realized this story was too unbelievable not to tell. It's a roller coaster of emotions, unexpected twists, and, in the end, the ultimate karma. So, let's get into it. My name is Sophie, and this story revolves around my ex-boyfriend, Dylan. We met when I was 22 and working part-time at a coffee shop while finishing my degree. Dylan, who was 30 at the time, worked there too, trying to pay off his student loans. His parents had financial troubles due to gambling, so he didn't have much of a safety net. Initially, we bonded over sharing our struggles, but as time went on, we grew close for real. He was charming in a quiet way, always making me laugh, and I thought we had something solid. 2 years later, after I graduated, I had finally saved up enough to move out and get my own place. Dylan, on the other hand, was still struggling with his debt and couldn't afford to move out. I cared about him, so I offered him a place to stay with me. The problem? He couldn't afford half the rent. Wanting to help, I agreed to cover 80% of the rent while he paid the remaining 20%. It felt unfair, but I convinced myself it was temporary. I kept telling myself that he just needed a little more time to get on his feet. Apart from rent, we split utilities equally, but things were already feeling unbalanced. Dylan's job was physically demanding, while mine was a corporate job with more flexibility. He often used his exhausting work schedule as an excuse to avoid helping with chores. Since I worked from home some days, I took on the cooking, cleaning, laundry, you name it. The only thing I asked of him was to take out the trash. Guess what? He didn't. At first, I let it slide, thinking he was just forgetful. But when I'd come home after long days and find the trash still overflowing, dishes stacked in the sink, and clothes dumped everywhere, I started seeing the pattern. One weekend, I left for a work trip, hoping Dylan would manage the house while I was gone. I even reminded him before I left, saying, "Please make sure things stay tidy while I'm gone." His response? "Of course, babe. Don't worry about it." When I returned, I walked into a disaster zone. Trash overflowing, food wrappers everywhere, dirty dishes stacked so high I could barely see the sink. The apartment smelled terrible, and it looked like he hadn't even bothered to pick up after himself. I was exhausted from my trip, but I still spent the entire night cleaning because I couldn't stand the mess. As I scrubbed the counters, I kept thinking, how does he not see this? How does he think this is okay? When Dylan got home, I thought he'd notice. Maybe even thank me. But he walked in, hugged me, turned on the TV, and acted like nothing had changed. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I asked him why he never helped. He gave the same old excuse, "I'm tired from work." When I pointed out that I also worked and still managed everything, he shrugged and said, "Well, I never asked you to do all this." I stared at him speechless. That one sentence made me realize I had been allowing myself to be used for far too long. I had excused his behavior, convinced myself that he was just going through a rough patch. But the truth was, Dylan never planned on changing because he never had to. So, I did something I had never done before. I set boundaries. I told him I wasn't going to clean up after him anymore, and if he wanted to live with me, he needed to start acting like an actual partner. I wasn't his maid, and I wasn't going to keep carrying the weight of the household alone. At first, he laughed it off, saying I was overreacting. But when I stopped picking up after him, the apartment quickly turned into a war zone. Dirty clothes piled up, dishes stayed in the sink for days, and takeout containers littered the coffee table. It was clear Dylan had no intention of stepping up. One night, I refused to make dinner, and Dylan stared at me confused. "Aren't you cooking?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I worked late today. You can cook, or we can order something." He scoffed, shaking his head. "I work harder than you, Sophie. I don't have time for this." That was the moment I knew he saw me as a convenience, not a partner. And the second I stopped making his life easier, things between us began to unravel fast. After that conversation, things between Dylan and me became unbearably tense. He didn't outright argue with me, but his attitude shifted in the worst way possible. If I wasn't going to clean up after him, he decided he would live in complete filth just to prove a point. It was as if he were waiting for me to break down and go back to doing everything for him. At first, I stood my ground. I let the mess pile up. I ignored the dishes in the sink, the laundry on the floor, and the garbage overflowing. But unlike Dylan, I actually cared about my living space. After a week of chaos, I caved not because I wanted to, but because I physically couldn't stand it anymore. However, instead of cleaning everything like before, I only cleaned my side of the apartment. My dishes were washed, my clothes were put away, and my space was tidy. Dylan's side? A disaster. I figured that if he wanted to live like a slob, he could do it on his own terms. That's when he started getting passive-aggressive. He'd make snide comments like, "Oh, I see you had time to clean your stuff, but not ours," or "Guess I have to be the responsible one now." The irony was laughable. But what really pushed me over the edge was the money situation. Dylan had promised that once he got a raise at work, he would start contributing more to the rent. That raise had come and gone months ago and not a single extra dollar had been added to his share. When I brought it up, he made excuses. I have debts to pay, I need to replace my car tires, I'll make it up next month. Next month never came. At that point, I started resenting him. I was paying for most of our living expenses, doing most of the work at home, and getting nothing in return but stress and frustration. And then, as if things weren't bad enough, I found out what he was really doing with his money. One evening, Dylan left his laptop open while he was in the shower. Normally, I respect privacy, but a notification popped up that caught my eye, an email confirmation for a dinner reservation at an expensive steakhouse. The kicker? The reservation was for two. I felt my stomach drop. We never went to places like that because, according to Dylan, money was tight. Yet here he was, making secret plans to splurge on someone else? That night, I waited until he came back into the room. I calmly asked, "Hey, do you want to tell me about the fancy dinner reservation?" Dylan's face drained of color. "It's just for a work thing," he said too quickly. I nodded, pretending to believe him. "Oh, cool. Can I come?" He hesitated for way too long before stammering, "It's more of a, guys thing. Just coworkers." I didn't buy it for a second. And that was when I knew I wasn't just dealing with a lazy partner. I was dealing with a liar. And I was done. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying Dylan's reaction, his hesitation, the way his voice wavered when he tried to explain himself. I had ignored a lot of red flags in our relationship, but this one was impossible to overlook. The next day, I decided I needed more than just suspicion, I needed proof. I wasn't proud of it, but I checked Dylan's laptop again while he was at work. It didn't take long to find exactly what I feared, messages between him and someone named Rachel. The conversation was flirty, filled with inside jokes and subtle compliments. And then I found it, the confirmation for the steakhouse reservation, followed by Rachel's excited reply, "Can't wait. Just the two of us, right?" I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. He had been lying to my face. Not only was he emotionally detached from our relationship, but he was also using the money he refused to contribute to rent to impress someone else. At that moment, my sadness turned to anger. I had spent 2 years supporting him, excusing his laziness and shouldering responsibilities he never even attempted to take on. And this was how he repaid me? Instead of confronting him right away, I decided to wait. I wanted to see how far he was willing to take his deception. That evening, I casually asked about his guys' night. He barely looked up from his phone when he said, "Oh yeah, just a quick dinner and some drinks. Nothing special." I smiled, playing along. "Oh, fun. Where are you guys going again?" His jaw tightened for just a second before he answered, "The usual bar downtown." That was all I needed to hear. He was digging himself deeper, completely unaware that I already knew the truth. The night of his work dinner, I made my plans. I dressed up, went out with my best friend, and made sure to enjoy myself for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, Dylan was out impressing Rachel with the money I had worked to save. But what Dylan didn't realize was that I had taken an extra step before he left that night. I had packed up all his stuff. I wasn't waiting for an explanation, an excuse, or some pathetic apology. The moment he walked through the door after his little date, he would find all his things neatly stacked in the living room, along with a note that simply read, "Since you can afford expensive dinners, you can afford your own place. We're done." And when he finally came home, the look on his face was worth every single second of waiting. Dylan walked through the door around midnight, looking pleased with himself, until he saw the packed bags in the living room. His smirk vanished instantly, replaced by confusion and then panic as he scanned the room, realizing what was happening. "Sophie, what is this?" he asked, his voice dripping with forced ignorance, like he genuinely didn't understand. I didn't bother with theatrics. I simply crossed my arms and said, "Since you can afford expensive dinners, you can afford your own place. We're done." For a moment, he just stood there, blinking, as if his brain refused to process the situation. Then, like clockwork, the excuses started. "Sophie, you're overreacting. It was just a dinner, she's just a friend." I raised an eyebrow. "A friend you lied about? A friend you were secretly taking on dates with money you told me you didn't have?" "Yeah, no thanks." He opened his mouth, closed it, and then tried a different angle. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." "Dylan, I literally saw the messages. You made a reservation for just the two of you. And let me guess, if I hadn't found out, you would have kept lying, right?" His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Then came the pity act. "But Sophie, where am I supposed to go? You know I can't afford my own place right now." That was the moment I realized exactly who Dylan was. He wasn't just a bad boyfriend, he was a leech. He never had a problem watching me struggle to pay for both of us and never felt guilty about letting me do all the work at home. The only time he cared was when it directly affected him. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "That's not my problem anymore, Dylan. You made your choices. You'll figure it out. He was still sputtering nonsense as I turned and walked to my room, closing the door on him and on this chapter of my life. Update. The next morning, Dylan was gone. He had no choice but to leave, and for the first time in years, I felt free. No more cleaning up after him, no more paying his way, no more resentment festering under the surface. But Dylan wasn't out of my life just yet. Because, as much as I was ready to move on, he had one last pathetic attempt up his sleeve. And I never could have predicted just how bold his next move would be. A few weeks after Dylan moved out, life finally started feeling normal again. My apartment was peaceful, my finances were back under control, and I was no longer walking on eggshells around someone who didn't respect me. I had moved on, at least, that's what I thought. One afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, sophomore, hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk about something important. Can we meet?" I stared at my phone, feeling an immediate wave of irritation. It was Dylan. I had deleted his contact, but his audacity was instantly recognizable. What could he possibly have to say now? I ignored the message, but Dylan wasn't one to take a hint. An hour later, another text came in. "Please, just hear me out. I need to talk to you in person. It's really important." I debated blocking him, but curiosity got the best of me. A part of me wanted to know what excuse he'd come up with this time. So, against my better judgment, I responded, "Fine. One coffee. That's it." We met at a cafe near my place. The moment I saw him, I regretted my decision. He looked smug, like he knew something I didn't. I kept my expression neutral and sat across from him. "Sophie, I made a mistake," he started, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I've done a lot of thinking, and I realized I took you for granted. I should have been better. I should have treated you the way you deserved." I folded my arms. "Let's skip the rehearsed apology. Why did you ask to meet?" His expression faltered for a second before he forced a smile. "I want us to try again." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Are you serious?" He nodded, leaning forward. "I've changed, sophomore. I got a new job, I'm more responsible now, and I know we had something real. I don't want to throw that away." I shook my head in disbelief. "Dylan, you didn't just make a mistake. You used me. You let me pay for everything, do everything, and when I finally stood up for myself, you ran to someone else." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Things were complicated. I was in a bad place." "You were in a bad place because of your own choices," I said, standing up. "And I'm not going to let you drag me back into your mess. We're done, Dylan. Have a nice life." I grabbed my bag and walked out, leaving him sitting there, speechless. I thought that would be the end of it, but I had underestimated just how desperate Dylan could be. Because 2 months later, I got an invitation that left me absolutely stunned. 2 months passed, and life had truly moved on. I was thriving at work, enjoying my freedom, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected while dealing with Dylan's nonsense. I had almost forgotten about him until I checked my mailbox one evening and found an elegant envelope waiting for me. Curious, I opened it and my jaw nearly hit the floor. It was a wedding invitation. Dylan was getting married. At first, I laughed, thinking it had to be some kind of prank. But no, there it was in black and white. "Dylan and Rachel invite you to celebrate their special day." Rachel, the same woman he had been secretly taking to expensive dinners while claiming he was broke. And the cherry on top, he had personally invited me. My name was printed neatly on the RSVP card, along with an option for a +1. For a moment, I debated tossing the invitation in the trash. After everything he had put me through, why on earth would I want to attend his wedding? Was this some twisted attempt at closure? A way to prove he had won by finding someone new and supposedly leveling up? I knew Dylan well enough to suspect there was something more behind this. Then a ridiculous idea formed in my mind. If Dylan wanted to flaunt his so-called success, I'd make sure I looked absolutely unbothered. And what better way to do that than by bringing the most unexpected +1 imaginable? I thought about it for days, going back and forth on whether it was even worth my time. But the more I considered it, the more tempting the idea became. This wasn't about revenge or pettiness, well, maybe just a little, but it was about walking in with my head held high and proving to myself that I had moved on in ways he never could. So I sent back my RSVP. And then I made a phone call. The person I had in mind for my +1 wasn't just any friend. He was someone Dylan would recognize instantly. Someone whom, at one point, Dylan had been insanely jealous of. Jason. Jason and I had known each other for years. He was my closest friend in college, and back when Dylan and I were dating, Dylan always acted weird whenever Jason's name came up. I had never cheated, never even flirted with Jason, but Dylan had accused me more than once of having a thing for him. Of course, back then, I reassured Dylan constantly that Jason and I were just friends. And we were. But Dylan never let it go. Even though he was the one lying and sneaking around, he always projected his insecurities onto me. And now, well, he was about to see Jason again, standing right next to me, looking better than ever. Jason was more than happy to go along with it when I called and explained the situation. He laughed so hard when I told him Dylan had invited me. Are you serious? He thinks you'd show up just to see him play house. Oh, I'm showing up, I said. And I need you to come with me. Sophie, he said, still chuckling. This might be the pettiest thing I've ever heard, and I love it. I'm in. And just like that, the plan was set. I found the perfect dress. Elegant, understated, but absolutely stunning. The kind of dress that made a statement without trying too hard. Jason, of course, looked like he had walked straight out of a magazine in his tailored suit. As we pulled up to the venue on the day of the wedding, I took a deep breath, feeling a rush of confidence. Whatever Dylan's true reason was for inviting me, he was about to realize he had made a huge mistake. Because I wasn't just showing up to his wedding, I was making sure he'd never forget it. As Jason and I stepped out of the car, I could already feel the eyes on us. The venue was a high-end country club, the kind of place Dylan used to scoff at because it was too pretentious. And yet, here he was hosting his wedding there. Jason adjusted his cufflinks and smirked. Ready for this? I grinned. Absolutely. The moment we entered, conversations around us quieted. People turned to look, trying to place who we were. I spotted a few familiar faces, some of Dylan's friends, a couple of his relatives who always seemed indifferent to me, and then, there he was. Dylan, standing near the altar, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, was deep in conversation with someone. Then he saw me. His entire expression shifted in an instant. First confusion, then shock, and finally, an almost comical mix of panic and disbelief. His eyes flicked between me and Jason, and I could see the exact moment he recognized him. The grip he had on his champagne glass tightened so much I half expected it to shatter in his hands. Jason leaned down, his voice just above a whisper. I think he remembers me. I laughed softly. Oh, he definitely does. As we moved deeper into the reception area, Dylan abandoned whatever conversation he was having and made a beeline toward us. Before he could reach me, someone else intercepted him, Rachel, the bride. She took his arm, smiling warmly, completely unaware of the internal crisis he was having. Oh, Sophie, you made it, she said cheerfully, walking up to me. I was so happy when Dylan said you'd be coming. It means a lot that you're here. I blinked. So this was her angle? Acting like we were old friends? I had expected cold politeness at best, but Rachel was treating me like I was some kind of honored guest. I smiled back, keeping my expression neutral. Of course, I wouldn't miss it. It's a big day for you too. Dylan was practically vibrating with tension beside her, but he hadn't found his voice yet. Jason, meanwhile, extended a hand toward Rachel. Jason, a friend of Sophie's. Rachel shook his hand. Nice to meet you. I don't think I've heard Dylan mention you before. Jason's smile was effortless. Oh, that's strange. Dylan and I go way back, don't we, buddy? He clapped Dylan on the back, and I could swear Dylan flinched. Rachel turned to Dylan, confused. Oh, really? How do you two know each other? Dylan looked like he was about to pass out. Oh, college. We had mutual friends. I could tell Rachel wasn't entirely convinced, but she was quickly pulled away by one of her bridesmaids. Jason and I made our way to the seating area where I enjoyed watching Dylan awkwardly steal glances in our direction throughout the night. He was distracted, uncomfortable, and absolutely thrown off his game. The cherry on top? When it came time for the bouquet toss, Rachel enthusiastically called me forward. I was about to decline when Jason nudged me. Come on, let's see how competitive you are. I laughed and walked up. The bouquet was thrown, and in a moment of pure irony, it landed right in my hands. A few people cheered, Jason gave me a playful wink, and Dylan? Well, Dylan looked like he was about to be sick. We didn't stay long after that. As Jason and I left, I stole one last glance at Dylan, who was still stiff and uncomfortable at his own wedding. For someone who had invited me to show off, he looked anything but victorious. Update. It's been a few months since the wedding, and from what I've heard through mutual friends, Dylan and Rachel aren't doing so great. Apparently, Rachel started questioning a few things after the wedding, including why Dylan was acting so weird that day. As for me, life is great. I've moved on completely, my career is thriving, and Jason and I? Well, let's just say that night led to a lot more than just a funny story. To anyone reading this, never let someone make you feel small. And if they ever try, show up, stand tall, and make sure they never forget it. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.